There we go.
Press the record button. So that would be the first episode, wouldn't it? Kind of, okay, how do you even get the thing going? So now it actually says record in the window. And then the question is, once it's done, is it just going to create a file then with this whole thing?
Yes, which it will make available to you.
Blind leading the blind. So, well,
the important thing is to say it with absolute certainty so that you give the impression of someone who's done this a million times before, and trust me, it's going to be fine.
That's awesome. I mean, it all comes down to assertiveness, doesn't it? I mean, you need to sound like you know what you're talking about, then you're usually golden. Well, obviously, I mean, I think since we're going to at least try and make this accessible to somebody else than just ourselves, I think a quick introduction might be in order, and I think I can go first. And that's the general idea behind this kind of, I'm not sure if I'm going to call this a project. Is it a project, or is it just a?
Well, does it have project management? Does it have project directives? Do we have stage gates? Do we have an agile model? Are we following? I don't think
we really got none of that. No, so that would be more of I don't know what, a shindig, a box social, or whatever, and it's something that would be more applicable to what we're doing here. But anyways, I mean, the general idea behind this, whatever it is that I had the idea because I was watching watching a podcast, and actually I'm that old fashioned that I actually sometimes watch the podcast studios, which I think is kind of fun. But I was thinking, okay, so this is pretty interesting, and why shouldn't I be able to do this? Because I do believe I've got some interesting, kind of insights into how the world works, at least from my unique perspective. And then I kind of followed that up by saying, okay, maybe I should do that with somebody, so it just won't be, a 15-minute rant of me being a crazy cat person and talking about the state of the world. So I thought about who would I most, want to do this with, and naturally it'd be you. So I think that kind of brings us on to the whole page of, okay, what is this? What's it going to be? And what's our perspectives? And I think let's start with the third question, because I don't have any answers for the first two ones really. So, and the third one is that there's two guys. I mean, it's me. My name is Gustav Stenbeck, and it's Andi Kravliacha, and we're going to get into what we do and why we do it. And I think the cool thing with what we're trying to aspire to do with this is that we want to bring, a perspective into the world about current affairs or whatever. And that's what we're going to do. But enough of me. Andi, I mean, give me the quick sum up. I've known you since you were 17 or 16 or whatever.
That's right.
Since we both were. But
That's
I mean,
right.
I guess that there's some people out there that don't know us since we've been 16 or 17. So let's start with where we're at now.
Even such amazing things. My name is Andi Kravliacha. I am a future strategist, and I work for the public sector in Sweden. I've worked for several municipalities, and I basically work with city government and city governance. And how do we run a city? How do we make a city? What should a city be? And what's it going to be in the future? How do we stay relevant? And so on. So future strategy, and I have a background in education and digitalization. So I used to work as a math and physics teacher. And after that, I worked in IT. Behind me, you can see a lot of guitar amplifiers, and there's some records on the wall. So I'm active in the music industry as well, and have some insights into the digitalization and the kind of future proofing that industry had to do in the last 20 years and so on. So that's part of my perspective. And as you say, I've known you since first year of high school. So it's been pretty cool to just kind of follow each other along the path of life.
Yeah, it's more than half our lives. I don't want to get into how old we are right now, but I mean, exactly. it's been for longer than 50% of our lives, and then you can do the math.
That's right.
But it's a cool thing, because I mean, we don't really talk about enough the digitalization and innovation kind of needs that are within municipalities. And I think you've got a really cool viewpoint to come with when it comes to those things. Really cool. So, and I'm going to try and keep up with Andi, and I'm working as an entrepreneur, a speaker, and venture capitalist, where I invest in and I help companies grow, essentially. And I do this within sustainability and usually tech, usually where those two kind of intersect. And I'm a big fan of the general idea of making the world better and building companies that are profitable. And I usually kind of sum this up by the inside of my arm that says, I want it all nowadays. It's not actually, I mean, I do like Queen, but I do think some of their songs are atrocious, but some are really cool. But I think it sums up kind of my personality. I do remember thinking that we once wrote a song, or I think you once wrote a song that was called "Too Much Is Not Enough."
That's right.
And I think,
That's right.
and I think that would be a good quote for my other arms. I've got some space left for "Too Much Is Not Enough" on the other side.
But I'll tell you what I read into that tattoo, man. And that's like, I want it all, particularly when you're talking about from a sustainability perspective. A lot of the times what we do when we do sustainability is that we sacrifice quality, or we sacrifice reliability, or we sacrifice how attractive something is, and we say, well, it's not good looking, but it's sustainable. It is okay in that fashion to say, I want it all. I want something which is both convenient and good looking and everything, and also, of course, sustainable. So I want it all is a great thing for the market to strive for.
It is. It really is. And I think usually when I give talks to companies, I travel, all across the world, or at least used to before COVID, and talked about this stuff. And usually I just say that if you can't do both, have a more sustainable product and be more profitable, you're just, essentially you're just using lazy product development. You need to be able to do both. And that's the whole I want it all thing. But I think, oh yeah, I'm gonna have to show you something about this. I'm actually, I think my headphones are good, even though I'm walking and I'm coming back. So you're gonna have to do some sort of a creative dance session here or something. But
oh, absolutely, we're seeing some artifacts in your sound over here, but we do still have you. It's nowhere near Apollo 13, sound quality.
So the reason why I'm showing my shoe is that I think this is so much on brand. It says on the side of this shoe, it says, "This shoe alone will not save the planet." And I think it's on brand for a speaker talking about sustainability, but I think it's also kind of a cool thing when it comes to showing you how you can take steps in becoming more sustainable, haha, pun intended, but also kind of think that, okay, you can send a sustainability message and you can move forward. I think Adidas is a great example of this. But nonetheless, I was thinking, the reason why I wanted to talk to you and the reason why we're kind of here was that I'm currently sitting in a house in Italy, and I got my energy bill the other day, and boy, that was a shock. Actually, to the point where I had to talk to the landlord, and I was like, "Oh my God, there has to be something wrong." And they were like, "What's wrong?" And I just told them basically the price of heating this place, and they just, "Well, that's normal. There's nothing wrong with that." And then I kind of started looking into the whole idea of, okay, how high are energy prices anyways? Because I've been so used to Swedish energy prices, because obviously I'm Swedish as well. And obviously they're more expensive here, but they're really a lot more expensive in Sweden and all throughout Europe right now as well. So I just wanted to touch on that. And I think that's going to be kind of the loosely held thread that goes through this episode, is the whole idea of what the heck is happening with energy in Europe or throughout the world right now. And what's this going to benefit out of a sustainability standpoint, out of an innovation standpoint, and those kinds of things. So I think that's where we're going to start. And well, obviously, what's your first impression when we start talking about this? You live in a house, preferably you like it heated.
I do like it heated, but I don't live in a house. I live in a rental apartment. So there are people who I have people for this. I pay a set rent every month, and I don't really worry about the heating. However, we do pay an electricity bill. And as anyone who is in Sweden knows right now, our electricity prices right now are astronomical for several reasons. And this has to do with, weather-related phenomena with the switch to, sustainable power sources. This has to do with shutting down, nuclear power over here. This has to do with Sweden being an exporter of electricity and of power, even though there's perhaps a need for electricity in the country as well. We need to maintain an export flow as well. So, energy prices over here, I have friends who live in houses whose, electricity bills have more than doubled in the past, 3 or 4 months alone. And they were high to begin with. So obviously I do have a perspective on this, but for me, coming from Sweden, where the reason why electricity costs a lot is taxes. It isn't really the cost of manufacturing the power. It isn't really the cost of maintaining the grid. It is a largely tax-related cost. And in Sweden, we actually pay value-added tax, VAT, which we in Sweden call moms, on power, on electricity. And of course, you start getting into that whole kind of using tax as an incentive And which direction do you want people to go to? On the one hand, we need to consume less power overall, and from that perspective, increasing the tax is good. On the other hand, we're trying to get people to electrify and buy electrical cars instead of buying diesel cars. And in this particular climate, it's actually cheaper to run a diesel car than an electric car. And you got to wonder.
That's actually a funny story. I just got to skip in because I think that's.
Go for it.
I have a Norwegian friend of mine here, and they told me that in Norway, obviously, I mean, the electric cars that are getting sold is a huge portion of the total sales. I mean, far more than half. I think it's something in the lines of 80 to 90% of all new car sales in Norway are electric. Don't hold me to that number. It's it's an estimate. Anyways, the reason was that when electrifying really started, the Norwegians then just basically said, okay, let's park our old diesel cars in the garage because they're worth virtually nothing right now. So they were, rather than being sold or scrapped or whatever, they just parked them in the garage and that was it. And then they drove their electrics. And now, with electricity prices being so high, it's actually more expensive to run an electric car than it is to run your old diesel car. So they've just switched spots now. So the electrics are going into the garage and out come the diesels. And I mean, you probably wanted to go there, but it's kind of cool how costing and cost structures really affect innovation, and in this way,
Absolutely.
in a really bad way.
Absolutely. And there's, to mirror and you know about this as well. There was a story in the news from northern Sweden a couple of weeks ago where they interviewed a guy. This is an anecdotal thing. It's one person, but it's indicative, and this was a guy who actually bought a diesel generator to run his house off of. And he said, with current electricity prices in northern Sweden being what they are, it's actually cheaper for me. So I'm going to run my house on a 24/7 diesel generator because I can't afford to pay my power bill on the grid. And then you got to start wondering about, tax incentivizing the move towards sustainability and so on. And wondering, maybe it's time to make an adjustment here and actually put back that incentive, which is now actually actively de-incentivizing people from moving towards a sustainable and electrified future.
But I remember, and I think this is kind of interesting though, because of course, I mean, higher costing should mean, a higher need to innovate. And I remember when I went to Florida, it was 2 years ago, before Corona. I think it was the end of 2019, and that was the first time I learned about Florida Man. I didn't know that was a thing before then. Florida Man, I love that. I think there's some sort of a generator online. You can search for Florida Man of the day. Anyway, I come to Florida and the prices for fuel are so painstakingly cheap for a Swede. It's like you come in and you fill your car up and it's full and you're like, it can't be full. Because I mean, we're looking at $25 on the pump here. I mean, it cannot be full. It's impossible. So you just keep trying to fill the damn thing and you realize it's full. I've even, turned so American in my way. I go into the gas store clerk and I'm like, you guys, you've got it good. Gas is so cheap here in Florida. And the guy just looked at me like I was an idiot. But
yeah, I mean, and for those who are out there who maybe don't have a reference, I mean, gas prices in Sweden are about $9 a gallon.
Oh yeah. I haven't done the conversion, but yeah.
So anybody who's looking at this from an American perspective, and gas is hitting $3 a gallon, and you guys are feeling the pinch. Well, ours is 3 times as expensive, so it's regularly it'll cost you over $100 to fill your car up.
Yeah. I mean,
if you're commuting to work, that's a problem. But of course, that also is largely taxes, and this is a case where we are actually incentivizing the shift to sustainable, the shift to electric by actually having a very high fuel tax. But despite this, energy prices are so high that now the electricity tax and the electricity price is actually even higher. So that's crazy. So now you got the Swedish family between a rock and a hard place, choosing which tax to pay, so to speak.
And I mean, I think this kind of goes to show, and this is something I talk about a lot when it comes to sustainability, is that we do have a problem because generally people want to do the right thing. I mean, we do. I mean, if you ask somebody, you want to do the right thing, I mean, they're not going to say no. And if you do, I mean, drop me a line or something. I'd like to talk to you and get your head checked. But I think it's generally you would say that, yeah, I want to do the right thing. But if it comes at, a premium, then a lot of people are going to drop off. And if it comes at, too high a premium, usually I think the studies that look at this is that usually there's some sort of a pain point that goes beyond 5 to 10% extra if you want to pay for sustainability. I'd like to put into evidence that it's not even that high, because in general, people, if you ask them, they'd like to pay 5 to 10% extra, but in reality, it isn't really all that much higher. And then if you kind of say, okay, we're going to do the right thing, you're going to have to buy an electric car, and that electric car is going to cost you 2 times as much as a regular one, at least, that's the way generally it looks right now. And
Yes.
and then on top of that, it's going to cost you the same amount, or perhaps even more in some days, to run than your old, kind of diesel or petrol or gas equivalent. Then all of a sudden, all these people that are like, yeah, I'm going to save the world, they get far fewer. They really do. But I mean, then again, as a municipality, you get parts of those taxes, don't you? I mean, wouldn't that be a good thing for kind of innovation in the public sector?
Well, taxes are sectioned. I mean, there's municipal tax, and there's regional tax, and there's state tax, which in Sweden means the entire country, so national tax. And of course, even though we get our municipal tax, we don't get every tax revenue. So the tax you actually pay at the pump, it doesn't go to us, but it does go to other things, which of course are good. I mean, of course, it's good that the government gets money to be able to build new roads, to build railroads, to build bridges and so on. But here's my beef with that. When you start talking about value added tax, VAT, a certain tax percentage, you've done a calculation of how much value is going to be added to something, and you've set a percentage according to what you're expecting that you're going to receive at the end of the year. Now, if the energy prices to start with, for environmental reasons, for instance, a lack of wind, or a lack of days that are sunny, or a lack of water in water reservoirs, or whatever, for environmental reasons, the electricity actually gets more expensive. That VAT now percentually, of course, is the same, but in terms of money,
Actual money
goes up.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
it goes up. So what I think the state should do at that point is regulate that VAT so that it stays the same. So because the income you were counting on for that year from electricity to be able to do with these things with, well, maybe you've already reached it by August. Surely that means that for the rest of the year, you should just take the VAT off of the price altogether, or at least adjust your economic plan to reflect this. But of course, we don't see this, because what government in the world says no to more taxes? Of course, there's going to be holes. If you give someone a surface, they will fill it with stuff. If you give someone more revenue, they will find holes to put that revenue in. But I think, particularly in this VAT situation, I think the Swedish government really needs to look at rebalancing that value added tax and thinking, does this actually work as an incentive toward the right thing?
But I think, as working within the private sector, I think it's kind of cool, because it's easy in the sense that we can have whatever price increases we have, we can hike the prices for our customers. We can kind of push the cost on to somebody else. And as long as we're fairly effective with our operations, and customers feel that they want our product, then they'll happily pay that, or at least they'll pay it, perhaps unhappily.
Begrudgingly.
But when it comes to kind of government initiatives, they don't really have any possibility to push costs onto the end consumer, do they? Because in the end, they've got their budget structure set for the year. So I could imagine if you're running some sort of a municipal initiative, with whether it's, well, I'm not going to make a fool out of myself and just do general assumptions here. I'm just going to limit this to saying a municipal organization. Then, I could imagine, getting a 2 times or 3 times higher energy price. That ought to suck. That ought to be pretty bad.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is, you're talking about something very interesting here, because when I give talks about, the future of municipalities and the future of tax funded organizations in the public sector, there's a lot of people who have my job title who talk about this demographic shift, the fact that we have more people over the age of 80 than we do, in working age percentually as an increase, which means that fewer people are going to have to work to support more people in retirement. And you do have all kinds of statistics on this, which kind of, to me, sounds pretty funny, because the public sector is the only business which is threatened by an increased demand for the services it provides.
Yeah,
because
that's true.
of this exact mechanism. Because even though there's an increased demand of the services they provide, they cannot hike the price up, and they cannot, pass that along to the consumer, which means that the more somebody uses your fixed wallet for the year, the worse your services are going to be. So an increased demand is a bad thing. And
but this
where
is
does
interesting.
that lead you in sort of like looking for innovation and looking to stay relevant in a value network and everything? You're approaching the question from completely the wrong direction. You're saying, how can we lessen the demand for the services we provide?
But also what I think is interesting is that you can't add the market mechanism on top of this. I mean, there's no competition, obviously. I mean, there's not like there's two municipalities. Well, technically you could move, but it's not like they could actually compete for the same customer or the same citizen.
Oh, I agree. I mean, people talk about, it's a deregulated electricity market. If you don't like it, you can just switch your power company. But how many people actually do that? Even though it's a relatively simple administrative thing, you do it online and you can switch your power company in a day.
Yeah.
What about moving house to a completely different municipality? You're never going to do that. I mean, it's a situation where sure, you can vote with your feet, but you're not going to do that for all intents and purposes.
I mean, we are seeing. I mean, and this is kind of a cool thing when it comes to the U.S. We're obviously seeing. We're hitting virtually every demographic in this talk. But there's something that I'm following because I'm a huge nerd when it comes to the U.S. and I love what happens in the U.S. and I've spent a lot of time both on the East Coast and on the West Coast, and I'm looking forward to spending more time in between. I've never been to Texas. I really want to go to Texas. Anyways, what's happening in California, obviously, is that there are people voting with their feet right now because obviously they think that things are getting pricey in terms of the California, what are we going to say, tax, and they're moving to Arizona or Texas or whatever. So of course it's not a huge trickle, but I mean it's written about everywhere. When you look at kind of the mainstream the US media, it is topics that get covered, and I think it's interesting to see that you can't just assume and say that we're this golden state and people are naturally always just going to live here regardless of what we do. And I think
that's very interesting. Yeah.
And we'll see how that kind of works out. I think in the end, I mean, I'd still love to live in LA. I don't have any problem with California. I'd love to be in California. But it's interesting to see how people at a certain point will start looking at voting with their feet, in the sense that Elon Musk is moving out of California. We're seeing other, kind of high profile companies moving out of Silicon Valley as well. So it's going to be interesting to see whether energy prices are going to contribute to that and get people thinking a little bit more about, okay, do I want to live here or do I want to live somewhere else? Do I want to live
what do you think happens?
Italy?
But what do you think happens when Amazon or Facebook or somebody wants to build a data center somewhere? I mean, these municipalities bend over backwards to welcome this company, and they will give them subsidies on energy prices as a standard part of the deal. Of course, you don't have to pay full price for energy because we want the jobs that you create. So already, there you're showing that your willingness to use energy prices as an incentive to get people to come or stay is something which is negotiable. It is not absolute, and is absolutely not absolute when it's Facebook or Amazon. And you got to kind of wonder just where do you sort of draw the line? Yeah.
No, but I think, and of course, I think that's kind of interesting coming from Northern Europe, where we, or at least specifically Sweden, where we've had this, long industrial kind of history, and for the past 100 years, we've been making stuff essentially, and we've got strong industries, and now we're moving into this knowledge economy. And the cool thing, or the interesting thing when it comes to these data centers, is that they're providing very little bang for their buck when it comes to how many jobs they provide versus the energy that they consume. But I think the upside, of course, is that if you put a data center in Sweden, which has a 98% carbon-free electricity generation, means that at least those data centers are per se going to be a lot more sustainable than if you place them somewhere else. But the problem, of course, is that then we're displacing possible other industries that could have had this 98% carbon-free kind of electricity at fair prices in order to become more competitive versus their international counterparts. So it's going to be cool,
and who use the power for something else than publishing photos of people's dinner. Honestly, because like there maybe tax incentives should be followed by commitments toward goals, and being a company which actively promotes consumerism, or a company which, doesn't work directly with sustainability, but is, for instance, a social network which can spread any kind of idea. Maybe that doesn't qualify for a tax incentive rebate purely because of what they use the power to generate. Now, I would be absolutely differently inclined if it were a company that was working on, hydrogen propulsion or whatever, but if it's something like Amazon, which actively promotes people buying things they don't need, maybe we shouldn't be using taxes to attract those people there, because, as you say, maybe they don't create as many jobs as people in local government think they do, because they see the size of the data center and think this is going to create 15,000 jobs. Well, it's more like 15. Should we be using taxes for that? Is just the question I'm asking.
But isn't this an interesting kind of where you get to shuffle the whole, kind of powers that be? Because usually you're kind of used to the idea of governments being almighty, all powerful, and that the companies basically come up, with their hats in their hands, and they kind of, okay, I want to talk to the lawmakers or the whatevers. But now we're seeing companies becoming so big that they can, run, competitions on which country is going to be the most profitable. And exactly. I think obviously it's hard for policymakers in that regard to actually then say that, yes, you can have a data center here, but we want it to come with these kind of targets or incentives or KPIs or whatever's, when somebody else is probably willing to give it away for free. So I mean, it's problematic, of course. But I think if we go back and try kind of circle this into some sort of a conclusion, what if we were to compare, the $9 per gallon equivalent of Swedish gas prices, or I'd say European, because Italian gas prices aren't all that far behind Sweden, and compare that to, the $3 or whatever that we're talking about in the US, and we're seeing how European cars in general have been, historically a lot more efficient when it comes to their mileage. Isn't there a good thing that we've got high electricity prices and energy prices right now? Or I'm kind of thinking, will something good come out of this? Or is it just going to be that states throw incentives on top of us and say that we're just going to take the edge off and then hope for prices to go down, rather than actually making the economy more efficient? Where do you think it's going to go?
I think you're absolutely right in that creativity loves constraint, and that it is always in the situations when we're most pressed toward fulfilling a goal that we reach our highest potential as an inventive and innovative species. I think, however, that there needs to be a stated goal to work towards. It was easy to develop new technology during World War II. There was a very clear goal. It was easy to do it during the Apollo program. There was a very clear goal. I do have a sense that, as you say, a lot of people say there's a very clear goal today. We talk about the climate crisis and the sustainability issue as though it is a crisis, which we need to take crisis measures to solve. But we don't see this in our everyday behavior. We still do the same things the same way we've always done them. And I wonder if it is the job of the public sector to maybe rally people around the idea that maybe these measures need to be taken. I mean, rationing of food was horrible during World War II, but people supported it because it helped them achieve a long-term goal. I wonder if the government could create that type of climate even here and say energy prices suck just the same way food rationing used to, but it's to help us achieve this goal. And here's how it helps us achieve this goal. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think the average citizen today sees the link between high energy prices, which make life hard to live, and this possible goal that we see but never really actually strive for in our everyday lives.
Because that's insightful. And I think I just have to go back to myself. I mean, when I had the bill for heating of the house, just last month, first thing I went out and did was I got myself a new smart thermostat. So now I can at least, kind of control my house smarter than what I used to. But, and of course that all of a sudden becomes incredibly, I'm going to get my money back real quick on that smart thermostat with the energy prices we've got going here down in Italy. And I think, out of that perspective, it's of course it's gonna be good in the sense that it's gonna make investments go quicker. But I think going back to the whole idea basically saying that innovation is something that goes downwards and up, in the sense that if you're talking about the innovator's dilemma, they're always talking about how new technology isn't going to come from above. It's going to become, cheaper technology that becomes more advanced, as in ARM processors taking over the CISC processor, previous x86 processor architecture. And it's going to be interesting to see, okay, if we've got high energy prices, what we need to do is get things that are incredibly more efficient in getting, kind of our standard of living up, whilst not actually affecting our price levels all that much. And I think with food rations, the problem obviously being that food rations would suck regardless. And of course, we can kind of support that because, well, there's a war, we need to win the war. And in order to win the war, we need to have food rations. When it comes to the climate, as you say, the link isn't as strong. And I think
exactly
the question is it up to governments or is it up to companies to make sure that that link becomes clearer? Because what I do like about companies is that we can take the innovative approach and kind of guide people into the future with the idea of this brighter, better future. And the municipalities or the state, they basically can have, they've got the stick and companies, they've got the carrot. So the question is, if we've got the stick in one hand, we need to have the carrot in the other hand. And I think that's my main gripe when it comes to companies, is that we're not really stepping up the way we should when it comes to aiding people to move into the more cost and energy efficient future, or in this case, or the more sustainable future in most cases. So I think that would be my takeaway.
When we put our mind to it, we can do anything we want. I mean, we've just about vaccinated the entire world 3 times over.
Yeah.
And most people have gotten it entirely without cost. And that entire project has been paid for without the rest of the world economy caving in on itself because of, all of the costs associated with this. If we need to take strong measures, we have the mechanisms to take those strong measures. What we lack is the courage to do it.
Yeah.
We work with elected officials who are elected, for a platform, and that platform does not include the answer to crises which arise during the tenure of this government. And it takes a very brave politician to say, you know what, I'm going to lower the quality of your life. I'm going to let new solutions in, which are going to make things temporarily work much worse than they did before. I'm going to lower the number of jobs in my country. I'm going to increase the taxes. I'm going to do all of this. But trust me, it's what we need in the long run. No politician does that because it is not, there's not a survival mechanism in the way we select our politicians, which kind of includes the possibility to do that. And this is where I think, as you say, the private sector has different rules to operate in. It's a lot easier to commit suicide as a company than as a government because governments rarely go bankrupt, but there are different mechanisms, and maybe we can use what's good in one mechanism to reinforce what's good in the other, exactly as you say.
I think there was a European Union politician that said, we're pretty clear on what we need to do to mitigate the climate crisis, but what we don't know is how we're going to get reelected after having done it. and I think that is my kind of try to summarize what you said. And I think it's a very interesting viewpoint, because then obviously you're thinking about your own political career ahead of what you obviously think is better for the world, which I think pretty much is the definition of being an asshole. But anyways, I think the reason going forward is that regardless if it's defined as assholedness or not, I think the idea, as you say, is that companies can move quicker, they can impose change quicker, and they can actually work quicker with getting people to change their behaviors. And I think that's where we kind of need to go with the future of this. And perhaps out of a company perspective, you can obviously ship more sustainable products, or you can make people's lives better when it comes to the high energy prices. So I think actually in summary,
let me just say, from that perspective, I do actually really believe that there is a positive value to virtue signaling, because what you're trying to foster. I know it absolutely sucks when everybody knows what Tesla owners behave like, and they're not always the most pleasant people to hang out with. The same with people who adopt certain eating styles and everything. They're not always the most pleasant people to talk to at a party, but there is a value in making a person subscribe to a certain vision of the future, because it strengthens their commitment as a consumer to support that end vision with their consumption. So even
True.
if those
Yeah.
shoes don't save the world, even if you could say that's just virtue signaling, they're just using, they're using recycled plastic to push out, consumer products, which nobody needs. They still need to be transported all over the world. They still, but there's still a value in somebody in fostering people to take sustainable choices, because once you've done that, you can start making the sustainable choices better, but you've already programmed into people that the sustainable choice is the one that you want to make. So
that's clever, and that's insightful. I think it's real, and I think in the end, in order to understand why I think that's important, because I just want to add something on top of that, because I completely agree, is that getting people sold on the vision is important, and also getting people to understand that the perfect solution isn't here today. Obviously, I mean, the Tesla isn't the sustainable car. It's a more sustainable alternative, but it's not a sustainable car in itself. I mean, there's a couple of iterations left before we get there. But if we're to wait for the perfect, kind of golden, silver bullet going up in the future, then we're probably going to have to wait another couple of years. And I think, I mean, you working with innovation and me as well, if there's one thing that is that, well, you can't wait for the perfect, solution. It's just, a good plan today is better than the perfect plan tomorrow. You just need to get started. And I think getting people sold on that vision then really is important. Cool. But I think, that's all I have to say about that. So I think I'm pretty happy there. Let's
me too.
Awesome. But let's sign out and see if anybody will listen to this and see if we'll do a second one. Who knows?
Comment, like,
Perhaps
and
we'll see you again
subscribe.
soon. There we go. I'm new at this. Comment, like, and subscribe. Awesome.
Take care.
Oh, wait, let's see. Shit.